3 days after the doctors told the Carter family that Raymond's condition was getting worse. His children were already fighting over his beach house in Miami. Not one of them asked whether he was in pain. Not one of them sat beside his hospital bed long enough to hold his hand. But the poor daughter-in-law they mocked for years stayed awake the entire night beside him, gently wiping sweat from his forehead while whispering, "You're not alone. Dad, I'm here." And behind his half-closed eyes, Raymond Carter realized something that terrified him more than death itself. The people he had spent his entire life providing for only loved the life his money gave them. At 68 years old, Raymond Carter was one of the most respected African-American businessmen in Atlanta. His face appeared in magazines beside politicians, celebrities, and athletes. He owned luxury apartment towers, restaurants, shopping centers, and half a dozen properties across the country. People called him brilliant, disciplined, untouchable. But inside the walls of his enormous mansion, Raymond lived with a silence that grew heavier every year. His wife, Eleanor, had died nearly a decade earlier after battling cancer, and since then, the family had slowly fallen apart in ways nobody outside the house could see. Family dinners became performances. Smiles became rehearsed. Conversations revolved around money, business, investments, vacations, and appearances. His eldest son, Marcus, acted like he was already the CEO of the empire. He wore expensive, tailored suits, drove exotic cars, and constantly reminded people he was next in line. He respected power more than people, and Raymond often caught him speaking to employees with cold arrogance that reminded him of younger versions of himself. Vanessa, Raymond's daughter, was elegant and beautiful, but underneath her polished image lived someone deeply obsessed with status. Every event had to be luxurious. Every photo had to look perfect online. She measured human value by wealth, connections, and influence. Then there was Devin, the youngest, charming when he wanted to be, careless most of the time. Devin lived fast, spent recklessly, and constantly jumped from one failed business idea to another. Raymond had bailed him out financially more times than he could count. And then there was Naomi, the woman nobody in the Carter family truly accepted. Naomi was Devin's wife, though sometimes it felt like the family spoke about her as if she were temporary. She came from a poor neighborhood in Louisiana and had grown up helping raise her younger siblings after her mother became sick. Before marrying Devin, she worked long shifts at a nursing home while studying part-time, trying to build a stable future for herself. She didn't come from money, didn't wear designer brands, didn't know how to fake sophistication around rich people, and because of that, the Carter family treated her like she didn't belong. Vanessa once laughed at Naomi during a family dinner because she mispronounced the name of an expensive French wine. Marcus constantly ignored her whenever she tried speaking during business conversations. Even Devin sometimes acted embarrassed by her honesty and simplicity when surrounded by wealthy friends. But Naomi never fought back. She simply smiled quietly and continued treating everyone with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. Raymond noticed that long ago. In truth, Naomi reminded him of Eleanor, not because they looked alike, but because both women carried the same calm strength that made other people feel safe. Still, Raymond rarely defended Naomi openly. Years of prioritizing business over emotions had turned him into the kind of man who observed pain silently instead of confronting it. Until the night, everything changed. It happened after a charity gala hosted at one of Raymond's hotels downtown. The event looked glamorous from the outside cameras flashing, wealthy guests laughing, champagne flowing beneath crystal chandeliers. But late that evening, Raymond returned home early after feeling sharp pressure in his chest. The doctor later assured him it was stress, not a heart attack. But what happened afterward shook him more than any diagnosis ever could. Unable to sleep, Raymond walked slowly down the upstairs hallway near the private lounge and heard voices inside. Marcus, Vanessa, and Devin were sitting together drinking whiskey. At first, Raymond thought they were worried about him. Then he heard Marcus laugh. "If Dad really gets sick this time, we need to figure things out before lawyers complicate everything." Vanessa sighed impatiently. "I already told you. The Miami property better not end up split equally. I practically designed that house." Devin leaned back on the couch. "Honestly, the company matters more. If Marcus takes control, we all know he'll cut us out eventually." Raymond stood frozen outside the door. His chest tightened again, not from illness, from heartbreak. None of them sounded scared to lose their father. They sounded scared to lose access to his money. Marcus continued speaking casually. "We should probably convince him to finalize updates to the will while he's still thinking clearly." Vanessa laughed softly. "You mean before he gets emotional and gives half of it to charity?" The room erupted in amusement. Raymond felt something inside him collapse quietly. For decades, he had convinced himself that success meant giving his children everything he never had. Growing up, expensive schools, luxury vacations, powerful connections, financial security for generations. But standing outside that door, Raymond realized he had raised children who valued inheritance more than humanity. And the most painful part, deep down, he knew it was partly his fault. He had taught them to chase success, but never taught them how to love. Raymond slowly returned to his bedroom that night, unable to breathe normally. He sat alone in darkness for nearly 2 hours, staring at an old photograph of Eleanor resting on his nightstand. In the picture, she was laughing while holding Marcus and Vanessa as children. Devin had not even been born yet. Raymond remembered that day vividly because Eleanor had once looked at him and said something he never forgot. "Promise me, money will never become more important than family." At the time, he laughed confidently and kissed her forehead. Now her words haunted him. The following morning, Raymond made 2 private phone calls. The first was to his longtime attorney. The second was to his doctor. And by the end of that week, Raymond Carter had created a plan that would change his family forever. He would pretend his health was rapidly deteriorating. He would step away from public life. He would make his children believe death was approaching. And before leaving this world, whether soon or years from now, Raymond wanted to know one thing with absolute certainty: who truly loved him, and who only loved what he owned. That evening, the entire family gathered at the mansion after hearing Raymond wanted to speak privately. The atmosphere felt tense. Marcus looked serious but strangely alert. Vanessa entered dramatically wearing oversized sunglasses, despite it being nighttime. Devin looked nervous. Naomi quietly carried a tray of tea into the living room before sitting silently near the corner. Raymond looked pale intentionally, speaking slower than usual. "The doctors found complications," he said calmly. "They believe my condition may be more serious than we thought." The room instantly changed. Vanessa covered her mouth in fake shock. Marcus leaned forward, immediately asking about medical reports. Devon stared at the floor silently, but Naomi reacted differently from everyone else. Her eyes filled with genuine fear. Not fear about money, fear about losing someone she cared about. And Raymond noticed it instantly. For the first time since beginning his plan, he wondered if he was prepared for the truth that he was about to uncover. The changes inside the Carter mansion began almost immediately after Raymond announced his condition was worsening. For the first few days, everyone played their roles perfectly. Marcus suddenly became attentive, calling doctors personally and speaking in a calm, professional tone whenever nurses visited the house. Vanessa started arriving with flowers and expensive fruit baskets she barely touched herself. Devon tried acting emotional, sitting beside his father for short periods while scrolling nervously through his phone. But Raymond had spent his entire life reading people, and once he started paying attention, the cracks appeared everywhere. Marcus asked too many questions about legal documents. Vanessa cared more about family image than Raymond's actual health. Devon looked terrified whenever financial discussions came up. Only Naomi behaved naturally. The first real test happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Raymond intentionally canceled the private chef for the night and told the staff to leave early. He wanted to see who would notice whether he had eaten. Hours passed. Marcus stayed in the office downstairs, taking business calls. Vanessa left after posting a dramatic black-and-white photo online with the caption, "Praying for strength during difficult family times." Devon disappeared into the guest house after an argument with someone on the phone. By nearly 10 o'clock at night, Raymond sat alone in his dark bedroom staring out at the storm outside. His stomach growled quietly. He heard footsteps once or twice pass the hallway, but nobody entered. Then, close to midnight, the door opened softly. Naomi walked in, carrying a small tray. Not expensive food, not something prepared by staff, just homemade chicken soup, warm bread, and tea. "I figured you probably didn't eat," she said gently. Raymond looked at her silently. The smell alone reminded him painfully of Eleanor. Years ago, when Raymond worked 18-hour days building his business empire, Eleanor used to wait awake for him no matter how late he returned home. She always reheated soup herself instead of asking staff to do it, because she said food tasted different when care was part of it. Naomi placed the tray beside him carefully. "You should eat while it's still hot." Raymond forced a weak smile. "You made this yourself." She nodded quietly. The kitchen staff left early. Raymond picked up the spoon slowly, pretending his hands were weaker than they truly were. Naomi noticed immediately and adjusted the tray closer without making him feel embarrassed. That small gesture affected him more than grand speeches ever could, because compassion often revealed itself through tiny details. Not performances, not expensive gifts, not public displays. Just simple human attention. As Raymond ate, Naomi sat quietly nearby folding laundry that one of the housekeepers had forgotten earlier. She didn't fill the room with fake positivity or dramatic sympathy. She simply stayed present, and strangely, that comforted him. "You don't have to sit here all night," Raymond told her after a while. Naomi smiled softly, without looking up. "I know. Then why are you still here?" She folded another towel carefully before answering. "Because sick people shouldn't feel alone." The simplicity of her answer stayed with Raymond long after she left the room. The next morning, Marcus arrived early carrying folders and financial reports. He closed the bedroom door behind him and lowered his voice. "Dad, there are some business matters we probably shouldn't delay anymore." Raymond already knew where the conversation was heading. Marcus sat beside the bed and adjusted his expensive watch nervously. "If your health keeps declining, investors are going to panic. We should start preparing official transition plans before rumors spread." Raymond stared at him quietly. For a moment he searched Marcus's face, hoping to see fear, sadness, concern. Instead, he saw calculation. "How long have you been thinking about this?" Raymond asked calmly. Marcus hesitated only briefly. "I'm thinking about protecting the company. The company, not the family, not his father, the company." Raymond nodded slowly, as if he understood. Marcus immediately relaxed and opened one of the folders. There are also a few documents regarding executive authority access, in case emergency decisions need to be made quickly. Raymond glanced down at the papers. Temporary transfer forms, power authorizations, control structures, everything prepared with disturbing speed. "You work fast," Raymond said quietly. Marcus gave a tight smile. "You taught me that." Those words cut deeper than Marcus realized, because he was right. Raymond had spent years teaching his children how to survive in business, but he had failed to teach them how to remain human while doing it. Later that afternoon, Vanessa entered the room, wearing a perfectly tailored cream-colored outfit that looked more appropriate for a television interview than visiting a sick father. She kissed Raymond lightly on the forehead before sitting elegantly near the window. "You really scared everyone," she sighed dramatically. Raymond watched her carefully. For years, Vanessa had mastered emotional performances so well that even he sometimes believed them. But now he noticed something different. She never maintained eye contact long when conversations became emotional. Instead, she redirected them toward practical matters. Sure enough, within minutes she began discussing the Miami property. "You know, Dad, if anything happens, managing that house could become complicated legally." Raymond almost laughed internally at how quickly she arrived there. Vanessa crossed her legs carefully. "I'm not saying we should discuss inheritance now," she added quickly, which usually meant exactly the opposite. "I just think organizing things early prevents conflict later." Conflict. As if his death were an upcoming corporate event requiring preparation. Raymond suddenly felt exhausted, not physically, emotionally. After Vanessa left, he remained alone for over an hour staring at old family photographs hanging across the room. In every picture his children looked happy. Birthdays, vacations, graduations, Christmas mornings. At what point had love quietly transformed into entitlement? Or had the signs always existed, hidden beneath wealth and comfort? That evening, Naomi found Raymond awake long after midnight. "You should try sleeping," she whispered while adjusting his blanket. Raymond looked toward the hallway. "Where's Devin?" Naomi hesitated. "He went out for a while." At this hour, she nodded carefully, clearly uncomfortable speaking negatively about her husband. Raymond studied her expression. "You cover for him a lot." Naomi gave a tired smile. "Marriage is complicated." Something about the sadness behind her eyes made Raymond curious. For years, he had assumed Naomi tolerated the family because she enjoyed the lifestyle wealth provided. But now, he began noticing how isolated she truly was inside this house. Even during dinners, she often sat quietly while conversations flowed around money, travel, and status symbols she never cared about. The next morning, Raymond decided to push the test further. When Naomi brought him breakfast, he intentionally knocked a glass of water from the bedside table onto the floor. The glass shattered loudly. Naomi rushed forward immediately. "Are you okay?" Raymond pretended to struggle moving his legs while she carefully knelt beside the broken pieces, gathering them with her bare hands. Suddenly, she flinched. A sharp piece sliced across her palm. Blood appeared instantly. Raymond's chest tightened unexpectedly. "Naomi, it's okay," she said quickly, hiding the pain. But Raymond saw blood dripping onto the carpet. "You're hurt. It's just a cut." She wrapped the hand quickly with a towel before continuing to clean the floor anyway. Raymond stared at her in disbelief. Most people in that mansion wouldn't inconvenience themselves for 5 minutes unless cameras were watching. Yet Naomi stood there, bleeding quietly while apologizing for the mess. And for the first time since starting this cruel experiment, Raymond felt ashamed of himself, because Naomi wasn't pretending. She genuinely cared. Meanwhile, everyone else seemed to be preparing for his funeral while he was still alive. That same evening, Raymond overheard another conversation downstairs. Marcus and Vanessa were arguing in the dining room. If Dad changes the will again, everything gets messy. Marcus snapped. Vanessa lowered her voice. "Then maybe you should spend less time acting like CEO already. At least I actually helped build the company. And I helped maintain this family's image for years." Raymond listened silently from the staircase. Not once during the entire argument did either of them mention his health. Only assets, control, ownership. Then Vanessa said something that made Raymond freeze completely. "We also need to watch Naomi. Sick old men get emotional, especially around people playing caretaker." Marcus scoffed. "Please, she's smart enough to know staying close to Dad benefits her." Raymond felt anger rise slowly inside him, because for the first time, he understood something clearly. They literally could not imagine kindness without selfish motives. That was how deeply greed had consumed them. Upstairs, Naomi sat alone in the guest bedroom quietly, sewing the loose button back onto one of Raymond's shirts because she noticed staff forgot to repair it. Simple things, invisible things, the kind nobody applauded. And Raymond realized those tiny, unnoticed acts carried more love than every expensive gesture his children performed, combined. As rain hit the mansion windows softly that night, Raymond lay awake, unable to stop thinking about one terrifying question. If he had truly died tomorrow, would his children cry because they lost their father, or because they lost access to his fortune? Over the next 2 weeks, the Carter mansion slowly transformed into something colder than Raymond had ever imagined. The house was still beautiful from the outside. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Perfect flowers bloomed across the enormous front garden. Crystal chandeliers still glowed warmly at night behind massive glass windows, but inside, tension moved through every hallway like invisible smoke. Nobody laughed naturally anymore. Every conversation sounded careful, measured, strategic. And Raymond began realizing his illness was no longer simply a family tragedy. To his children, it had become a countdown. One afternoon, Marcus arrived with 2 financial advisors pretending they were there to reduce stress for Raymond. But the moment they entered the office downstairs, Raymond understood the real purpose immediately. Marcus stood beside the window speaking confidently. "If certain transitions happen unexpectedly, we need to make sure leadership remains stable." One of the advisors nodded cautiously. Investors are already asking questions. Raymond remained seated quietly in his wheelchair near the fireplace. Marcus turned toward him. "Dad, nobody wants to pressure you. But if we don't organize executive control now, the company could become vulnerable." Raymond studied his son carefully. Marcus looked polished, controlled, professional, but there was no emotion in his eyes, only ambition. "What exactly are you asking for?" Raymond said calmly. Marcus slid a folder across the desk. "Temporary authority transfer papers." "Again." Raymond slowly flipped through the documents while Marcus continued talking. "I've already been managing most operations anyway. This just makes things official in case your condition worsens suddenly." Condition worsens. Marcus said it almost clinically, like discussing weather forecasts instead of his father dying. Raymond closed the folder gently. "I'll think about it." For the first time, irritation flashed across Marcus's face. Only for a second. But Raymond caught it, because disappointment appeared faster than concern. That hurt more than shouting ever could. Later that evening, Vanessa hosted a small gathering at the mansion, without even asking Raymond first. Wealthy friends filled the downstairs lounge drinking wine while soft jazz music played in the background. Raymond overheard pieces of conversations while resting upstairs. "So tragic about your father. Hopefully he recovers." As he finalized everything, yet Vanessa loved sympathy when it increased social attention around her. At one point, Naomi quietly entered Raymond's room carrying medication and paused awkwardly after hearing laughter downstairs. "I didn't know there were guests." Raymond sighed tiredly. "Neither did I." Naomi adjusted his blanket gently. "Do you want me to ask them to lower the music?" Raymond looked toward her. Unlike everyone else in the house, Naomi always asked what he needed, instead of deciding for him. "That's all right," he said softly. "I doubt they'll stay quiet long." Naomi hesitated before speaking carefully. "You should rest. Stress isn't helping your health." Raymond almost smiled. Even now, she believed the illness completely, and somehow that made him feel worse about deceiving her. After Naomi left the room, Raymond slowly walked toward the upstairs balcony, overlooking the main lounge below. Vanessa stood near the piano, laughing dramatically, while holding a champagne glass. Marcus discussed investments with two businessmen near the bar. Then Raymond noticed Devin sitting alone in the corner, drinking heavily. His youngest son looked exhausted, sweaty, nervous. Every few minutes he checked his phone anxiously. An hour later, Raymond finally discovered why. Around midnight, loud voices erupted from the library downstairs. Raymond moved quietly near the staircase and listened. "You borrowed money again," Marcus snapped. Devin slammed a glass onto the table. "Lower your voice. How much this time?" "That's none of your business." Vanessa folded her arms impatiently. "If debt collectors start appearing around this family while Dad is sick, you're going to destroy our reputation." Devin laughed bitterly. "Our reputation. That's what you care about." Marcus stepped closer aggressively. "You need to fix this before Dad finds out." "I already tried." Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. "What does that mean?" Devin hesitated, then quietly muttered, "I asked Dad for help last month." Marcus exploded immediately. "You what he said no." Vanessa looked horrified. "How bad are things?" Devin stayed silent. That silence answered everything. Raymond leaned against the staircase railing, feeling disappointment settle deeper into his chest. Years earlier, he had rescued Devin from financial disasters repeatedly. Failed restaurants, reckless investments, gambling problems disguised as business risks. Every time Raymond paid the consequences away, and every time Devon learned nothing. Downstairs, the argument intensified. Marcus rubbed his forehead furiously. "This is exactly why Dad never trusted you with responsibility." "Oh, please," Devon snapped back. "At least I don't walk around waiting for him to die so I can take his chair." Vanessa immediately intervened. "Stop it, both of you." But the damage was already done, because for one brief moment, everyone in that room fell silent. Not because the accusation was false, because it was true. Raymond slowly returned upstairs before anyone noticed him listening. When he entered his bedroom, Naomi was there again, arranging fresh towels near the bathroom. "You're still awake?" she asked gently. "Couldn't sleep?" Naomi noticed the tension in his face immediately. Was it the pain again? Raymond looked at her quietly. It amazed him how naturally she focused on his emotional state while everyone else focused on logistics. "Something like that," he answered softly. Naomi poured him tea without asking further questions. That was another thing Raymond appreciated about her. She never forced conversations, never pushed for information. She simply stayed beside people until they were ready to speak. After a few minutes, Raymond asked suddenly, "Why did you marry Devon?" Naomi looked surprised. Then she smiled faintly. "Because he used to make me laugh." "Used to." Raymond noticed that word immediately. Naomi sat near the window staring into the darkness outside. "When we first met, he was different. He was kind, generous. He talked about opening community centers one day for kids in poor neighborhoods. What happened?" She gave a sad little shrug. "I think sometimes people lose themselves, trying to become who others expect them to be." Raymond knew she wasn't only talking about Devon. This family consumed people slowly, especially anyone still trying to hold on to kindness. The next morning, Raymond's doctor visited the mansion for another stage consultation. Staff moved carefully around the house, while Marcus and Vanessa waited dramatically outside the room, pretending deep concern. After the doctor left, Marcus immediately cornered him. "How serious is it now?" The doctor gave the vague answer Raymond instructed him to use. "We need to prepare for multiple possibilities." Vanessa's face tightened, and instead of sadness, Raymond saw panic. Not grief, panic. That afternoon, Raymond decided to test something else. He announced during lunch that medical treatments were becoming increasingly expensive, and that several investments might need restructuring temporarily. The reaction was instant. Marcus stopped eating. Vanessa slowly lowered her fork. Devon looked terrified. Only Naomi responded differently. "We can cut unnecessary expenses around the house," she said naturally. "Nobody needs all this extra staff right now anyway." The others looked offended by the suggestion. Vanessa laughed awkwardly. "Naomi, this house runs a certain way." Naomi stayed calm. "I'm just saying money should go toward his health first." Marcus exchanged a glance with Vanessa. Raymond noticed everything, because unlike his children, Naomi's first instinct during crisis was sacrifice, not preservation. That same evening, Vanessa entered Raymond's room carrying old photo albums. "I thought memories might cheer you up," she said sweetly. But within minutes, the conversation shifted again. "Dad, have you updated the trust arrangements recently?" Raymond almost closed his eyes from exhaustion. Even fake affection eventually circled back to money. Meanwhile, downstairs, Naomi quietly prepared dinner herself, after several kitchen staff members left early. Raymond watched secretly from the hallway, as she moved around the kitchen, tired but focused. Then Vanessa entered unexpectedly. She looked around in disgust. "You're cooking yourself." Now Naomi remained calm. "The staff left. You could have ordered something." Naomi stirred the soup silently. Vanessa crossed her arms. "You really know how to position yourself perfectly during all this." Naomi turned slowly. "I don't understand." Vanessa laughed coldly. "Come on." Sitting beside him constantly. Acting like the devoted daughter. "You think nobody notices?" Naomi looked genuinely hurt. "I'm just helping. Because you care, or because you know lonely rich men become emotional near the end." Silence filled the kitchen, even from the hallway. Raymond felt his jaw tighten. Naomi lowered her eyes briefly before answering softly. "I would take care of him, even if he had nothing." Vanessa scoffed. "That's easy to say now." Then she walked away without another word. Naomi stood motionless beside the stove for several seconds after Vanessa disappeared. Raymond noticed her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't cry, didn't defend herself, didn't complain. She simply wiped her eyes quietly and continued cooking. And for the first time in many years, Raymond Carter felt genuine shame as a father, because the kindest person in his entire family was also the one suffering the most inside it. Late that night, Raymond couldn't sleep again. He sat alone in darkness, thinking about Eleanor. Years ago, she used to warn him constantly. Children don't become spoiled only because they receive too much, she once told him. They become spoiled when love is replaced by entitlement. Back then, Raymond believed success itself would hold the family together. Now he understood how wrong he had been. Somewhere downstairs, he heard Naomi softly cleaning dishes alone while the rest of the mansion slept peacefully in luxury, and Raymond suddenly realized something heartbreaking. If Naomi disappeared tomorrow, she would leave behind silence. But if his fortune disappeared tomorrow, his entire family would probably disappear with it. The next morning, Raymond woke before sunrise to the sound of quiet movement downstairs. For a moment, he thought it was one of the housekeepers starting early. But when he slowly walked toward the kitchen, he found Naomi sitting alone at the dining table surrounded by bills, notebooks, and a small calculator. She looked exhausted, still wearing yesterday's sweatshirt. A cold cup of coffee rested beside her untouched. Naomi quickly closed the notebook when she noticed him standing there. "You should be in bed," she said softly, standing immediately. Raymond looked toward the papers anyway. Most of them were household expenses, medication receipts, staff payments, food invoices. "You've been handling all this yourself." Naomi hesitated. Someone needed to... "Where's Marcus?" At the office, Vanessa Naomi gave a faint smile without humor. She had an event tonight. And Devon. That question lingered in the air longer. "I think he came home around 2. Raymond slowly sat down across from her, for the first time in years. The great Raymond Carter felt old in a way money could not hide, not because of wrinkles, not because of illness, because he suddenly understood how alone Naomi had been carrying everything, while the rest of the family remained consumed by themselves. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he asked. Naomi shook her head lightly. "There was a problem with one of the insurance payments. I was trying to organize things before morning." Raymond stared at her silently. This woman had no legal responsibility to manage his life, no obligation to sacrifice sleep for him, yet she did it naturally, without asking for praise. And strangely, that hurt him more every day, because the test he created was exposing truths he no longer wanted to see. Later that afternoon, Raymond asked Naomi to sit with him on the back patio, while the weather remained warm. The enormous garden behind the mansion glowed under soft sunlight. Fountains flowed quietly nearby. Birds moved through tall trees planted years earlier by Eleanor herself. For the first time in weeks, the house felt peaceful. Naomi wrapped a blanket gently around Raymond's shoulders before sitting beside him. "You planted these roses?" Raymond asked, after noticing her trimming dead flowers carefully. Naomi nodded. "Your wife used to love them." Raymond looked surprised. "How do you know that she told me once?" That answer hit him unexpectedly. "Eleanor talked to you about the garden." Naomi smiled softly. "A few times before she passed." Raymond looked down at his hands. Most people remembered Eleanor as elegant and graceful beside her wealthy husband. But Naomi remembered small details instead. The flowers, the conversations, the human parts. "What else did she tell you?" Raymond asked quietly. Naomi hesitated, as if unsure whether she should answer. She said this family wasn't bad at heart. Naomi admitted gently, "Just lost." Raymond closed his eyes briefly. Even after death, Eleanor still protected them. "She always believed people could become better," he murmured. Naomi looked toward the fountain thoughtfully. "I think they still can." Raymond almost laughed sadly. After everything Naomi endured inside this family, she still defended them. The conversation drifted naturally after that. For the first time, Raymond stopped observing Naomi as part of his test and started truly seeing her. He learned she grew up in Baton Rouge in a tiny apartment beside a laundromat. Her mother worked night shifts for years while Naomi practically raised her younger brother and sister alone. He learned Naomi loved books as a child and dreamed of becoming a nurse because she admired people who made others feel safe. But dreams became expensive after her grandmother got sick. So Naomi left school temporarily and started working. Then temporarily became years. "I used to study between shifts," Naomi said quietly with a small smile. "Sometimes I'd fall asleep on library tables." Raymond listened carefully. There was no self-pity in her voice, only honesty. "And your father?" he asked carefully. Naomi's expression changed immediately. A sadness passed across her face so quickly most people would have missed it. "He died when I was 20. I'm sorry." She nodded slowly. "We couldn't afford proper treatment. By the time doctors discovered what was wrong, it was already too late." Raymond stayed silent. Naomi looked down toward her hands. The hardest part wasn't losing him, she admitted softly. It was knowing he was scared and pretending not to be because he didn't want us worried. Something tightened painfully inside Raymond's chest. Because suddenly he understood why Naomi never left him alone at night. Why she always checked his medication twice. Why genuine fear appeared in her eyes every time he pretended to struggle breathing. She wasn't caring for a millionaire. She was trying to save someone she once lost before. "You loved him very much," Raymond said quietly. Naomi smiled sadly. "He worked himself to exhaustion his whole life, trying to provide for us. Sometimes I think people don't realize how much pressure fathers carry silently." Raymond turned his face away slightly after hearing that, because no one in his own family had spoken about him with that kind of understanding in years. Not Marcus, not Vanessa, not even Devin. Only Naomi seemed capable of seeing beyond money and status into the human being underneath. That evening, Raymond remained thoughtful long after their conversation ended. But downstairs, the atmosphere inside the mansion was becoming increasingly ugly. Marcus had begun spending more time inside Raymond's private office, reviewing company documents without permission. Vanessa constantly made phone calls behind closed doors, discussing properties and social obligations. And Devin. Devin was unraveling. Around midnight, Raymond heard shouting again near the garage entrance. This time, the voices sounded harsher, more desperate. "You lied to me," Naomi said quietly. Raymond moved closer silently without being seen. Devin paced angrily beside the car. "I said I'd handle it. You said the gambling stopped. It did stop. Then why are collectors calling your phone at midnight?" Devin rubbed his face violently. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Naomi stared at him with heartbreak more than anger. "Your father is upstairs believing he's dying." Devin exploded suddenly. "And what about me? Huh? You think living under Marcus my whole life was easy? Dad never looked at me the way he looked at him. That's not an excuse." "No. But maybe if somebody in this family respected me for once," Naomi interrupted softly. "I respected you when nobody else did." That silence afterward felt devastating. Even Raymond felt it, because Devin had no response. Naomi's voice trembled slightly now. "I married you when you had nothing." Remember that Devin looked away immediately, and Raymond suddenly realized something painful. Naomi wasn't staying because she loved wealth. She stayed because she refused to abandon people, even when they disappointed her repeatedly. The next morning, Vanessa cornered Naomi near the staircase while staff cleaned nearby. "I heard about Devin's situation," she said coolly. Naomi stiffened immediately. "That's private." Vanessa smirked faintly. "Nothing stays private in this house." Naomi tried walking away, but Vanessa stepped closer. "You should be careful." Naomi turned slowly. About what Vanessa lowered her voice. "When Dad dies, people are going to start asking questions if suddenly the poor daughter-in-law benefits financially." Naomi looked stunned. "You think I'm after his money?" Vanessa crossed her arms. "I think desperate people do desperate things." Naomi's face hardened for the first time. Not angry, wounded. "My father died in a public hospital because we couldn't afford proper treatment," she said quietly. "Do you really think I'd use a dying man for money?" Vanessa looked uncomfortable for half a second, but pride returned quickly. "You can say whatever you want. I'm just warning you how things look." Then she walked away. Naomi remained standing alone near the staircase, trying hard not to cry. And upstairs, hidden from view, Raymond felt fury building slowly inside him. Not because Vanessa questioned Naomi, because she could no longer recognize genuine goodness when it stood directly in front of her. That night, Raymond asked Naomi to stay longer after bringing his medication. She sat quietly near the fireplace while rain tapped softly against the windows. After several minutes, Raymond finally spoke. "Why do you keep staying here?" Naomi looked confused. "You need someone here. That's not what I mean." Silence filled the room briefly. "You could leave." Raymond continued softly. "This family hasn't exactly made life easy for you." Naomi stared into the fire quietly, then finally answered in almost a whisper, "Because leaving people when they're suffering changes something inside you." Raymond felt chills move through him. Naomi continued softly. "When my father got sick, some people disappeared because they didn't want the burden. I remember how much that hurt him." She looked toward Raymond now. "I never wanted to become that kind of person." Raymond suddenly couldn't speak. because at that moment, sitting across from the poorest person in his family, he understood something that shattered him completely. Naomi possessed more dignity, more loyalty, more humanity than everyone else living inside that mansion combined. The following week, Raymond decided it was time for the final test. By now, the truth inside the Carter family had become impossible to ignore. Every day revealed another layer of selfishness, another hidden resentment, another conversation poisoned by greed. But Raymond needed certainty, not suspicion, not assumptions, certainty. So, early Monday morning, he called his attorney and doctor to the mansion privately before anyone else woke up. Together, they finalized the next phase of the plan. Raymond's doctor would announce that his condition had become unstable and that the coming month would be critical. At the same time, Raymond's attorney would temporarily freeze several discretionary family accounts under the excuse of protecting estate assets during medical uncertainty. No more unlimited spending. No more effortless access to wealth. Raymond wanted to see who would stay once comfort disappeared. By noon, the entire atmosphere inside the mansion changed violently. Marcus stormed into Raymond's room first. What the hell is going on with the accounts? Raymond remained calm in bed. The attorney recommended temporary restrictions. Marcus looked furious. This affects business operations. No, Raymond corrected quietly. It affects personal spending. Marcus clenched his jaw immediately. Raymond noticed something cold enter his son's eyes. Not concern. Resentment. You're letting outsiders influence family decisions now, Marcus asked carefully. Raymond almost laughed at the irony. Outsiders. As if Marcus himself hadn't been treating his own father like a financial institution for weeks. The attorney works for me, Raymond replied calmly. Marcus paced toward the window, trying to control himself. You realize investors are already nervous. Funny, Raymond said softly. You seem more nervous than the investors. Marcus turned sharply. For a second, genuine anger slipped through his polished image. Then just as quickly, he forced himself calm again. I'm trying to protect what you built. Raymond looked directly into his son's eyes. And who's protecting me? The question landed harder than Marcus expected. He had no answer. A few hours later, Vanessa arrived in a panic. Unlike Marcus, she didn't even pretend the conversation was about Raymond's health. Dad, my cards were declined. Raymond stared at her silently. There must be some mistake. No mistake. Vanessa sat down immediately, lowering her voice. I have events scheduled this month. Payments. Commitments. Then perhaps you should postpone them. Vanessa blinked in disbelief. You don't understand. No. Raymond replied quietly. I finally do. For the first time in her life. Vanessa looked genuinely uncomfortable around her father. Not because he was dying, because she was losing financial control. And Raymond saw it clearly now. Every expensive dinner, every emotional performance, every dramatic hospital visit, all of it depended on access to wealth. Without money, the affection started cracking apart almost instantly. But the worst reaction came from Devon. That night, Raymond heard shouting echoing from downstairs again. Only this time it sounded desperate. You told me you had emergency savings, Naomi whispered sharply. I did. Then where did it go? Silence. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. Oh my God! Devon rubbed both hands across his face. I was trying to fix everything before Dad found out. With gambling. It wasn't gambling. Then why are people threatening you on the phone? Raymond stood silently near the hallway listening. His heart sank deeper with every word. Devon looked broken now. Not arrogant, not spoiled, just lost. I thought I could win enough back to cover the debts, he admitted quietly. Naomi sat down slowly, like the strength had left her body. How bad is it? Devon didn't answer immediately. That silence terrified her more than numbers. Finally, he whispered, "Almost everything." Naomi covered her mouth. Raymond closed his eyes briefly upstairs. His youngest son had spent years chasing shortcuts instead of stability, and now the consequences were swallowing him alive. But what happened next shocked Raymond completely. Naomi stood up quietly, walked toward the bedroom, and returned carrying a small wooden box. She opened it carefully on the table. Inside were jewelry pieces, simple pieces, nothing extravagant. A necklace, bracelets, a few rings. Raymond recognized them instantly. Her mother's jewelry. "I can sell these," Naomi said softly. Devon stared at her. "No, you need help." I said, "No, you're my husband." Her voice trembled slightly now. "We fix things together." Raymond felt his chest tighten painfully. This woman was willing to sacrifice the last valuable things connected to her family history for a man who kept lying to her, and somehow she still chose loyalty. Meanwhile, his own children couldn't even pretend compassion unless money remained attached to it. Later that night, Naomi quietly entered Raymond's room carrying tea again. But this time she looked exhausted beyond words, dark circles beneath her eyes, shoulders heavy, hands trembling slightly from stress. "You should rest," Raymond told her softly. Naomi forced a smile. "I'm okay." "No, you're not." That sentence almost broke her. She sat carefully near the chair beside his bed, trying hard to maintain composure. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Naomi whispered quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you ever scared?" Raymond looked at her carefully. Of what she stared down into the teacup. "Failing the people you love?" The question hit him deeply because she unknowingly described his entire life. Raymond exhaled slowly. "Every day." Naomi nodded silently, like she understood more than he realized. "You know," she said softly, "people think money protects families from problems." Raymond almost smiled sadly. "And does it? No," Naomi whispered. "It just hides the problems longer." That sentence stayed in Raymond's mind long after she left the room. 2 days later, Raymond staged the final emotional test. Near midnight, while only Naomi remained awake downstairs organizing medication schedules. Raymond intentionally collapsed near the staircase. The sound echoed violently through the mansion. Naomi ran instantly. Dad Raymond lay motionless against the floor, pretending to struggle breathing. Panic flooded Naomi's face immediately. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Raymond, look at me." Her hands shook while reaching for her phone. "Stay with me. Okay, please stay with me." Raymond had expected concern. What he hadn't expected was fear this real. Naomi's voice cracked while speaking to emergency services. "He can barely breathe. Please hurry." Tears rolled down her face openly now as she held his hand tightly. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered desperately. "You hear me? You're gonna be okay." Within minutes, lights filled the mansion. Marcus arrived furious and disoriented. Vanessa appeared in silk pajamas, complaining nobody informed her sooner. Devon stumbled downstairs pale from alcohol. But while chaos exploded around them, Naomi never left Raymond's side, even inside the ambulance. She climbed in beside him without hesitation. At the hospital waiting room, Raymond secretly watched everything through half-open eyes while doctors performed the fake emergency procedure. Marcus paced angrily, making phone calls about legal delays. Vanessa argued with staff about private waiting arrangements. Devin sat isolated, staring blankly at the floor. And Naomi. Naomi sat alone in the corner, crying silently into both hands. Not performing, not speaking dramatically, not calculating outcomes, just terrified someone she loved might die. Hours later, when the doctor announced Raymond had stabilized, Naomi broke down completely with relief. She covered her face, crying openly. Thank God. That moment shattered the last doubt Raymond still carried, because nobody cries like that for money, only for love. Back at the mansion later that morning, Raymond remained awake in bed, thinking about everything he had witnessed. His children feared losing inheritance. Naomi feared losing him. And suddenly, the answer became painfully clear. The poorest person in the family was the only one who truly understood what family meant. 3 days after the hospital incident, Raymond announced he wanted the entire family present at the mansion Friday evening for an important discussion regarding final arrangements. Those 2 words changed everything. Final arrangements. The atmosphere inside the house became almost unbearable after that. Marcus spent hours inside the office, pretending to review business projections, but Raymond knew his son was preparing mentally for control. Vanessa suddenly became unusually attentive again, bringing flowers, touching Raymond's shoulder gently whenever others were nearby, performing grief like an actress rehearsing her final scene. And Devin looked destroyed. The gambling debts, Naomi's disappointment, and Raymond's worsening condition had finally crushed the arrogance out of him. For the first time in years, Raymond saw fear in his youngest son's eyes, real fear, not fear of poverty, fear of becoming someone he hated. Meanwhile, Naomi continued caring for Raymond quietly, as if none of the tension around the inheritance existed at all. That Friday morning, she entered Raymond's room carrying fresh towels and medication. "You should eat something before tonight," she said softly. Raymond watched her carefully. Even now, she still believed he might truly be dying. And guilt had started eating at him more every day. "Naomi," he said quietly. She looked up immediately. "If something happened to me, would you leave this family?" The question surprised her. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. Why not? Naomi folded one of the towels slowly before answering. "Because despite everything, broken people still need someone." Raymond lowered his eyes for a moment after hearing that. Broken people. That described the Carter family perfectly. Not evil. Broken. And somehow Naomi still saw humanity inside them even when they didn't deserve it. By evening, the entire mansion felt tense enough to suffocate. Rain hammered softly against the giant windows, while lightning flickered occasionally across the Atlanta skyline outside. The family gathered inside the formal living room shortly after 7. Marcus arrived first in a dark, tailored suit, looking more like a future executive than a grieving son. Vanessa entered next, wearing elegant black clothing as if attending a high-profile memorial already. Devin looked exhausted and hollow-eyed. Naomi sat quietly near the back of the room, uncomfortable around the heavy silence filling the space. Raymond intentionally delayed entering. He wanted them sitting there alone with anticipation, with greed, with fear. Finally, after several long minutes, the doors opened. The room immediately fell silent. Raymond walked inside slowly, but differently than before. No wheelchair, No trembling hands, no visible weakness, just slow, steady steps. Marcus frowned instantly. Vanessa's expression shifted with confusion. Devin looked up sharply. Naomi stared at Raymond like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Raymond stopped near the fireplace and looked at every one of them carefully. Then he spoke. "My condition isn't terminal." Silence. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Vanessa blinked first. What Raymond's voice remained calm. The illness was exaggerated. Marcus stood up immediately. "What are you talking about?" Raymond looked directly at him. "I wanted to know who my family really was before I died." The room exploded. "You tested us!" Vanessa snapped. Marcus stepped forward furiously. "This is insane." Devin looked completely lost. Only Naomi remained frozen silently in her chair. Raymond raised one hand calmly. "For weeks, I watched every conversation, every reaction, every argument." Marcus's face darkened instantly. "You manipulated all of us." "No," Raymond answered sharply. "I revealed you." That sentence hit the room like a slap. Vanessa laughed bitterly. "So what now? You embarrass everyone and call it wisdom." Raymond's eyes hardened for the first time. "You discussed my inheritance while believing I was dying." Nobody answered, because nobody could deny it. "I heard you fighting over houses." Raymond continued. "Over businesses, over money." Marcus crossed his arms defensively. "We were trying to prepare responsibly." "Responsibly," Raymond repeated quietly. "You prepared for my death faster than you prepared to comfort me." Marcus looked away immediately. Raymond turned toward Vanessa next. "You treated this family tragedy like social theater." Vanessa's face flushed. "That's not fair. You were worried about canceled events while I was pretending to lose my life." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Then Raymond looked toward Devin. The disappointment there felt heavier than anger. "You kept gambling while believing your father was dying upstairs." Devin lowered his head slowly. "I know," he whispered. For several seconds the room stayed painfully silent except for rain outside. Then Marcus spoke again, colder now. So this whole thing was some twisted lesson. Raymond stared directly at him. No, it was grief. That answer caught everyone off guard. Raymond's voice softened slightly. "Because I realized something terrifying the night I heard my own children discussing my death like a business merger." Nobody moved. "You want to know the truth," Raymond continued quietly. "I spent my entire life building wealth because I thought it would protect this family." He looked around the room slowly. "But all I did was raise people who became emotionally dependent on money." Vanessa scoffed defensively. "That's rich coming from you." Raymond nodded immediately. "You're right." That response stunned her into silence. "This is my fault, too," he admitted. "I taught all of you how to chase success, but I failed to teach you how to love people without conditions." For the first time all evening, genuine emotion entered the room. Not anger, not greed, shame. Then Raymond slowly turned toward Naomi. She still looked overwhelmed, tears forming quietly in her eyes, except for one person. Everyone followed his gaze toward her. Naomi shook her head slightly, already uncomfortable with attention. Raymond walked closer. "For weeks, you believed I was dying." Naomi's eyes filled instantly. "And not once did you ask me for money." The room stayed silent. "You stayed awake beside me when everyone else went home." Tears rolled down Naomi's face now. "You cleaned this house. managed medications, cooked meals, sat with me through nights you thought might be my last. Vanessa looked visibly uncomfortable. Marcus remained expressionless but tense. Raymond's voice cracked slightly now, and when I collapsed, you cried because you thought you were losing family. Naomi covered her mouth, trying not to break down emotionally. Raymond looked toward the others again. The poorest person in this family was the only one who understood what family actually means. Marcus exhaled sharply. So what now? She gets rewarded. Raymond turned toward him slowly. Yes. The room froze again. My estate plans have changed. Vanessa immediately stood up. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Raymond walked toward the table where legal documents waited neatly prepared. My charitable foundation will now be managed primarily by Naomi. Vanessa stared in disbelief. What she will also receive ownership percentages from several properties and company investments. Marcus stepped forward furiously. This is insane. She manipulated you emotionally. Naomi immediately shook her head through tears. No, but Raymond interrupted sharply. Enough. The force in his voice silenced everyone instantly. For the first time in years, someone in this house treated me like a human being instead of an opportunity. Marcus laughed bitterly. She's not even your real daughter. Raymond looked directly into his eyes. No, he said quietly, she became something more important. That sentence shattered the room completely. Devon finally spoke, his voice weak. Dad. Raymond turned toward him. Devon's eyes were red now. I'm sorry. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, Raymond believed someone in the room was telling the truth. Not because of inheritance, because guilt had finally broken through pride. Naomi suddenly stood up, wiping tears from her face. I don't want money, she whispered emotionally. Raymond smiled sadly. I know. That was exactly why she deserved it. The rain outside intensified, while silence filled the mansion again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not cold, not calculating. Painfully honest. And Raymond finally understood something that changed him forever. Blood creates relatives, but sacrifice reveals family. The days following Raymond's revelation felt strangely quiet inside the Carter mansion. Not peaceful, just exposed, as if years of pretending had finally collapsed. Leaving everyone standing in the ruins of who they thought they were, Marcus barely spoke during breakfast anymore. He buried himself in work and avoided looking at Raymond directly. The confident future CEO, who once walked through the mansion like he owned it, now moved through the halls with wounded pride hanging over him like a shadow. Vanessa disappeared for nearly a week. No calls, no dramatic apologies, nothing. Raymond later heard from relatives that she was furious, telling anyone who would listen that her father had humiliated the family. But beneath the anger, he suspected something else existed too. Shame. Not because she almost lost the inheritance, because somewhere deep inside, she knew he had spoken the truth. And Devon changed the most, and not immediately. Transformation never happens that way. At first, he simply looked broken. The fake illness had forced him to confront himself without distraction for the first time in years. The gambling debts, the lies, the selfishness. The way Naomi cried in that hospital believing Raymond might die while he sat downstairs drunk and drowning in self-pity. It haunted him. One night, Raymond found Devon alone in the backyard sitting beside the fountain Eleanor used to love. The air felt cool and still. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Devon finally said quietly, "I became someone Mom would have hated." Raymond looked at his youngest son carefully. "No," he answered softly. "You became someone lost." Devon laughed bitterly. "Does that really make a difference?" Raymond sat beside him slowly. "It does, if you're willing to find your way back. For the first time in many years." Devon cried openly in front of his father. Not dramatic tears, not self-pity, just exhaustion. "I don't know how to fix anything anymore," he whispered. Raymond stared at the water quietly before answering. "You start by telling the truth." The next morning, Devon did something nobody expected. He gathered Naomi, Raymond, Marcus, and Vanessa in the living room. His hands shook slightly while speaking. "I sold the car." Marcus frowned. "What my car?" Devon repeated quietly. "I used the money to pay part of the debt." Nobody answered. Devon looked toward Naomi next, and I contacted a recovery program. Naomi stared at him silently. "I know, sorry isn't enough." He continued, voice trembling slightly. "But I'm tired of becoming worse every year." For several seconds, Naomi said nothing, then quietly asked, "Are you really done lying this time?" Devon nodded slowly. "Yes." Naomi looked away, trying to control her emotions, because despite everything, part of her had been waiting a long time to hear those words. Marcus remained skeptical. "Of course. You think one speech fixes years of mistakes?" Devon looked toward his brother calmly. "No, but maybe honesty has to start somewhere." Raymond watched the exchange silently. For the first time in years, the Carter family wasn't performing perfection. They were finally standing inside truth, and somehow, even painful truth felt healthier than fake harmony. Meanwhile, Naomi struggled deeply with Raymond's decision regarding the inheritance and foundation control. 2 days later, she entered Raymond's office carrying legal documents nervously. "I can't accept all this." Raymond looked up from his desk calmly. "Yes, you can. It's too much. You think I gave it to you because you took care of me." Naomi hesitated. "Didn't you?" Raymond smiled sadly. "No." He stood slowly and walked toward the large window overlooking downtown Atlanta. "I gave it to you because you understand people." Naomi remained silent. "You know what the greatest poverty is?" Raymond asked softly. She shook her head, feeling unloved while surrounded by everything money can buy. Naomi lowered her eyes. Raymond turned toward her again. "You sat beside me when everyone else was calculating percentages." Tears gathered quietly in Naomi's eyes again. "You reminded me of who Eleanor used to be." That nearly broke her emotionally. Because Naomi had loved Eleanor deeply, too, before cancer weakened her. Eleanor often spent time with Naomi in the kitchen talking about life, family, and faith, while the rest of the mansion remained busy chasing appearances. "She believed in you long before I did," Raymond admitted quietly. Naomi wiped her eyes quickly. "I never wanted to replace your children." Raymond walked closer gently. "You didn't." His voice softened. "You reminded them what love was supposed to look like." Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, something unexpected began happening inside the Carter family. Healing. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. Marcus eventually approached Raymond privately one afternoon. "I was angry at you," he admitted stiffly. "I know." Marcus exhaled slowly. "But maybe I was more angry because you were right." That confession alone probably cost Marcus enormous pride. Raymond respected him for saying it. Vanessa took longer, but one evening she quietly visited Naomi in the garden, while volunteers prepared decorations for a charity event hosted by the new Carter Foundation. Naomi looked surprised seeing her there. Vanessa stood awkwardly for a moment before speaking. "I judged you." Naomi stayed silent. "I kept thinking kindness had to be fake, because most people around me were fake." The honesty in her voice sounded unfamiliar, fragile. Vanessa looked down, embarrassed. "I'm not very good at this part." Naomi gave a small, emotional smile. "Neither is anybody at first." And for the first time since joining the Carter family, Vanessa hugged her sincerely. No audience, no performance, just human regret. But the greatest transformation happened inside Raymond himself. After decades of obsessing over expansion, profit, and reputation, he started spending more time away from boardrooms and more time inside the foundation Naomi now managed beside him. Together, they created programs supporting elderly patients abandoned in hospitals and nursing homes. Because Raymond never forgot the terror he saw in Naomi's eyes the night she believed he might die alone. They funded caregiver support programs, medical assistance projects, community kitchens, and every time Raymond visited those places, he noticed something humbling. The people with the least often gave the most love. One cold December evening, nearly a year later, the Carter Foundation hosted a holiday dinner for elderly residents from several care homes across Atlanta. The ballroom glowed warmly with music, laughter, and soft golden lights. Naomi moved through the crowd helping volunteers carry meals while elderly guests smiled around her. Raymond stood near the back quietly watching everything. Then suddenly, he noticed an older man holding Naomi's hand emotionally. "Thank you for remembering people like us," the man whispered. Naomi squeezed his hand gently. Nobody deserves to feel forgotten. Raymond felt his throat tighten unexpectedly, because those words captured the entire lesson he almost learned too late. For years he believed success meant being admired, but now he understood something far more important. Human beings don't fear death most. They fear being abandoned. A few minutes later, Naomi walked over carrying 2 cups of tea. "You disappeared," she teased softly. Raymond smiled faintly. "Just thinking." She handed him a cup. What about Raymond looked around the ballroom. Marcus was helping volunteers organize chairs. Vanessa laughed sincerely with elderly women near the stage. Devin carried trays beside kitchen staff while Naomi's hand rested naturally against his back as they passed each other. Not perfect people, but trying. Finally trying. Raymond looked toward Naomi quietly. "All my life," he said softly, "I thought I was building an empire for my children." Naomi smiled gently. "You did." He shook his head slowly. "No." His eyes filled with emotion. "I think God sent me a daughter instead." Naomi's eyes watered instantly. Without another word, she leaned forward and hugged him tightly. And for the first time in decades, Raymond Carter no longer felt like the richest man in the room. He simply felt loved. Outside, snow began falling softly across Atlanta, while warm light glowed through the foundation windows into the night. And inside that room, surrounded by imperfect people finally learning how to care for one another, Raymond understood the truth that wealth had hidden from him for most of his life. Money can build houses, but only love can build a home.